Sliced by the tropics of Cancer and hanging like a teardrop in front of the Chinese coast, the island of Taiwan is most known for its vivid night markets, tall skyscrapers, and a high-tech sector which supplies the world's best semiconductors and consumer electronics. But this island is so much more, with dramatic tropical mountains and vast alluvial plains residing side by side, surrounded by the ocean. The relatively young island is a product of the convergence zone between the Eurasian and Philippine plates, and has only seen the light of day as recently as 5 million years ago. The rift upon which it lies shapes pretty much every aspect of life on the island, and naturally divides the topography into two distinct zones with the mountains and the plains, which we'll explore in this video. Chapter 1. The Eastern Mountains. Spanning almost 2/3 of the entire island, Taiwan is covered by a rugged blanket of mountains and gorges, but what from afar looks like one massive lump is being subdivided into a total of 6 smaller ranges by the National Land Surveying and Mapping Center of Taiwan. Starting on the eastern flank of the island, the Haiyan Range, also called the East Coast Mountains, are standing on a slim wedge protruding from the coast. Topographically, it is separated by the main mass of elevated land by a roughly 3-kilometer wide trench, which guides the eastern rivers of Taiwan to the ocean. As the northernmost extension of the Luzon volcanic arc, which starts in the northern Philippines, it has a slightly different backstory than the main mountain mass further west. The mountains here are rather mellow, topping out at 1,680 meters above sea level, and act as a gentle introduction to the tropical mountains that are to come. Just behind the narrow trench, the mountains are rising quickly, and we enter the largest continuous mountain range of Taiwan, with way over 100 peaks surpassing the 3-kilometer mark. This dense network of heavily forested slopes with bare rock outcrops overshadowing them plays a vital role in protecting Taiwan from Mother Nature's wrath. Lying around the tropics of Cancer, with no other landmass to the east of it, Taiwan lies right in the path of the regular tropical storms which blast in from the Pacific Ocean, but thanks to the up to 70-kilometer wide mountain mass, most of these typhoons get dissipated before they reach the major urban centers on the west coast. Ecologically, more alpine and temperate plants take over the scenes, with maple and evergreens like the Taiwanese spruce taking over the slopes. After an extensive deforestation campaign during the Japanese occupation in the first half of the 20th century, the forest cover of Taiwan has decreased by about 20%, but since the 1990s, the flora and fauna has largely recovered again, and today the extremely low population density in the mountains gives the wildlife ample space to flourish. Running parallel to the central mountains, the 2 smaller mountain ranges called the Yushan and Alishan Mountains are stretching along the lower half of the island and house the tallest peak of the island, before gently lowering to the coastal plains. Yushan, also called Mount Jade, stands 3,950 meters above sea level, and not just represents the tallest mountain of Taiwan, but also the tallest mountain in the Western Pacific region and the 4th tallest mountain in the world, located on an island. Named after the gemstone jade, which is said to have a similar color to the summit when it is covered by a blanket of snow, the seas of clouds which often build in the valleys surrounding the mountain attract over 1 million tourists per year to the adjoining Yushan National Park. At the northern tip of the Yushan and Alishan Mountains, where the rocky outcrops fade into a more mellow highland plateau, a basin between the ridges has accumulated some of the water flowing down from the mountainsides to become a shallow but broad lake named the Sun Moon Lake. Named after the resemblance of its shoreline, with the sun in the east and the moon in the west, the 8 square kilometer large lake is the largest of the rare natural lakes of the island, and marks the transition to the Xuishan Mountains, the 4th of the central ranges, which closes off the east-west separation of the island. With the furthest reaches marking the northeasternmost point of Taiwan, this range has presented a great obstacle between the capital city Taipei and the fertile Yilan Plains on the alluvial fan of the Lanyang River. To combat this inaccessibility, the Taiwanese have spent 15 years drilling the 13-kilometer-long Hesuishang Tunnel through half the mountain range. But this civil engineering effort just scratches the surface of what is needed to connect all parts of the island. The geographical barrier of the north-south running mountains for the entire length of the island has long challenged the demographic distribution of Taiwan and has resulted in a very uneven distribution of population centers today. Only 4.2% of the island's population can be found in the 3 easternmost provinces, despite these covering 28% of the total landmass. Just behind the most densely populated area of Taiwan, we now find the last of the 6 official mountain ranges of the island. behind the 20 by 20 kilometer large bowl, separating it from the rest of mountainous Taiwan. On the northernmost outcrop of the island, the Datun Mountains stretch in a near circular manner into the ocean. The volcanic system houses a total of 20 volcanic domes and cones, and was created around 2.5 million years ago, or around the midway point of the island's total lifespan. The Datun volcanic group, which runs along 2 volcanic ridges, had severe magmatic eruptions until around 6,000 years ago, which has set the flora ablaze, but since around the 6th century, no more eruptions can be confirmed. This doesn't mean, however, that the volcanic activity has ceased completely. Magma chambers are still assumed to lay within the crust under the mountain range, and several hydrothermal features are scattered around the national park encompassing the area. The volcanic cones, hot springs, cherry blossoms, and waterfalls are now the best nature gateway for the people of Taipei, which live as close as 15 kilometers to these volcanic features, with the southern section of the Yangmingshan National Park even overlapping with the outer city limits. Built around the confluence of the Dahan, Xindian, and Keeling rivers, the Taipei Basin brings us to Chapter 2, the coastal plains. With 6.6 million people living in the mountain-enclosed Taipei Basin, the metropolis represents the cultural, governmental, and economic center of the island, with its Xinyi district and the landmark Taipei 101 standing as a demonstration of the meteoric rise of the city since the Second World War. With 14 out of the 20 tallest buildings of the island being located in the Taipei Basin, the geological faults spreading across the island have played a major role in architecture and urban planning of the space. While the bowl itself is often spared from earthquakes right underneath, the area with the most intense regular earthquakes lies just a few kilometers off the northeastern shore of Taiwan, and the resulting shockwaves traveling through the ground from these earthquakes is still enough to threaten the buildings and infrastructure. On a yearly basis, 15 to 18,000 earthquakes are shaking up the island, and while the vast majority of these are too minor to even be noticed with human senses, and the engineering behind most of the structures in Taiwan standing at the forefront of earthquake safety, there have been still 15 earthquakes with casualties since the turn of the millennia. Especially devastating was the island-wide 1999 earthquake that cost the lives of 2,415 people, taking down $9 billion of infrastructure and buildings with it. Following the Dahan River from downtown Taipei back up its stream, we arrive at Taipei's satellite city, Taoyuan, which has started stealing some of Taipei's success in recent years, since the capital is simply running out of space to expand. Many tech companies and industrial parks have sprung up, and the drastically lower cost of living has presented a great alternative to the way more famous Taipei city. Continuing the coast further south, connected urban areas appear virtually till the southern coast of the island, only interrupted by the forested outliers of the Xueshan Mountains. Being challenged by the limited low-lying spaces on the island, the Taiwanese seem to have taken every opportunity to spread themselves out between the mountains, having formed major cities wherever a larger basin opens up. The north-south divide of the island is typically marked by the Zhushui River, which with 203 kilometers from the Hehuashan Mountain to the Taiwanese Strait is also the longest river of the island. South of this river, the Yannan Basin starts opening up, and with the largest continuous area of arable land on the island, the Japanese, and later the Taiwanese, started doubling down on extensive agriculture here. An extensive irrigation system has been developed, which diverts waters from the major rivers across the plain to facilitate the agriculturally most productive region of Taiwan. 35 reservoirs, 16 groundwater wells, and intake from 114 small and large rivers from the mountain slopes are distributed through 9,000 kilometers of main, lateral, and sublateral canals to allow for 3 annual harvests of rice in the Yannan Basin. Bound to the south by the Zhangwen River, we now enter the final basin of Taiwan, which closes off the coastal plains to the south. Fed by the Gaopeng River, which curves through the gorges between the Alishan and Yushan mountains. It drains a major part of the southern mountain slopes and accelerates yet another agricultural zone. Like most Taiwanese rivers, the volume flow significantly increases during the rainy season from May till October, increasing 20-fold compared to the winter month. During these phases of increased flow, the river carries a significant amount of sediments, which get picked up in the mountainous section and get deposited in the alluvial plains further down the river. These deposits have created an over 1 kilometer wide alluvial fan around the riverbanks, and the fertile soil now provides a major pillar to Taiwan's food security. Being located around 300 kilometers further south than the capital Taipei, the climate of the most southern tip has now transitioned from the fast-bending temperate zones to a tropical climate according to the Köppen climate classification. and daily mean temperatures do not sink under 20 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit anymore. From the mouth of the Gaoping River, the Hengchun Peninsula stretches for another 70 kilometers southward until Cape Ilwanbi marks the most southern point of Taiwan and parts the waters of the Philippine and South China Sea to complete our journey around Taiwan. Standing as a mountainous fortress in the Western Pacific, the story of the geography of Taiwan is one of resilience and adaptability. Despite the natural challenges of the land, with a lack of natural resources and 2/3 of the island being covered by hard-to-traverse mountains, the Taiwanese people are making the best out of the land, utilizing the little opportunities that Mother Nature provides them, and showing pride in their natural heritage. I hope you enjoyed this overview of Taiwan, and if you want to learn more about the most interesting geography of our planet, I can recommend one of these videos here. Also, I've recently set up a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you want to further support the work I'm doing, it is now possible to leave a small donation here. The link is in the description below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.